I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah Kodash. I want to give double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, because those are the men who I learned the truth from through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Yahweh is the true name of the God of Israel. Yahweh Shai is who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one and only true name is Yahweh Shai. And pretty much I want to go back over the basics, because you know the basics, it never gets old. The milk, it never gets old. And you got a lot of people, especially Christians, even men, that they know that they're Hebrew Israelites, but they're lacking the breath. As it says in Ezekiel 37:8, the sinews and the flesh came up upon them, but inside, meaning their spirit, there was no breath. All right, meaning that they don't have the gift of faith, they don't have the Holy Spirit to be able to teach the correct gospel and doctrine and understand it and be made wise unto salvation. Now, you got particular people, like they'll read Acts the 10th chapter concerning Cornelius and the vision that Peter had that links up with Hosea 8:8, and they think just because Yahweh Shai, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, died for the Israelites, when you read Acts 5:31, they think that grace is a license to sin. They think that you can add sin to sin. And that's not what Yahweh Shai promoted. That's not what the 12 disciples promoted. All right. And, you know, through the blood and sacrifice of Yahweh Shai, that doesn't mean that we can act and live like Gentiles. All right. Because that's how Christians act. You know, they'll use that as an excuse. Oh, well, the Lord, he died for my sins. So, you know, I could eat like a Gentile. I could worship like a Gentile. You know, I could amalgamate myself in this world. And that's not what the Lord died for. Now, grace through the blood and sacrifice of Yahweh Shai is for the elect of the nation of Israel. So that the elect, as long as you have faith upon Yahweh Shai, you're not held to that old covenant standard that you can't keep in sinful flesh. Because we're sinners called back to repentance. All right. So without further ado, I want to go over Leviticus, you know, the 11th chapter, because, you know, there's certain laws we could keep as Israelites. You know, the Israelites is the so-called Negroes, Hispanics, and Native American Indians. Our seed line makes up the 12 tribes of Israel. And when you read about the story of like Moses receiving the law, statutes, and commandments, talking to the Israelites, that's our history. So the Heavenly Father, he gave us the perfect guidelines on how to live on the planet Earth. He gave us a heritage. He gave us a culture. All right. And part of our heritage is dietary laws. See, a lot of our people, they die of cancer because of their diet. You got to maintain your diet. All right. Now, I went on Google. I typed in Leviticus 11 AI overview, right? It says Leviticus 11 outlines Yahweh's dietary laws for the Israelites, distinguishing between clean animals, meaning animals you can eat, it says permissible to eat, and unclean, meaning forbidden, meaning you shouldn't eat that. Meaning if you eat it, it's going to be a consequence to your health, right? It says based on physical characteristics like split hooves, right, like a pig. It says chewing the cud and having fin/scales, right? These regulations emphasize holiness, setting Israel apart from other nations. Going back to what? Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. It says, setting Israel apart from other nations and symbolize purity in daily life. It says key aspects of Leviticus 11. Land animals. It says clean animals must have a completely split hoof and chew cud, right? And it gives you examples like cows and sheep, 2 animals we can eat. Because what comes out of sheep? Lamb, right? And, you know, cows, like with beef, right? Steak. It says you can eat stuff like that. You know, you cook it well done. You make sure no blood is in the food, and you can eat it. All right, season it up. It says unclean animals include camels, You're not supposed to eat camel. But you got the descendants of Ishmael, which are not Israelites, right? They eat camel. They'll roast a whole camel, sit at a table with their family members and pick at the dead camel's carcass. You ain't supposed to eat that, but they're heathen. That's their way of life. Let them do that shit, all right? Us as Israelites, we're not supposed to be like the heathen. That's why we went into captivity. That's why we are scared as a people. That's why we went through all the different slave trades. That's why the curses of Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, came upon the seed line of Israel from wanting to be like the heathen, wanting to amalgamate ourselves among the heathen. All right? It says pigs. You're not supposed to eat pigs. Pigs don't sweat. They don't have sweat glands. So if you know about a pig and a pig's diet, pigs eat trash. They eat rotten carcasses. Pigs eat shit. Pigs is just a disgusting fucking animal. But you got a lot of these restaurants, even people's daily routine, eating breakfast, wanting a bacon, egg, and cheese. All right, they eat a lot of pig. They eat swine, especially when you look at Central and South America, a lot of their menus, it consists of pork under different Spanish names. All right, you ain't supposed to eat that because pigs, they don't regurgitate their food. Their bodies don't properly break down the food so that if you eat pigs, you'll get the nutrients that the pig ate. But pigs don't eat nothing nutritious, all right? A pig is not meant to eat. You're not supposed to eat that. And pig meat, it has worms in it. That's why when you go on YouTube and you see people doing like different experiments with like pig meat, putting like Coca-Cola or leaving it out, it has worms in it, all right? That's why a lot of people, they have tapeworms. A lot of people, they end up dying internally because your diet. It says, and rabbits. You ain't supposed to eat no damn rabbit. Why would you want to eat a rabbit? It says water creatures must have both fins and scales. It says shellfish, shrimp, crab, and catfish are prohibited, meaning you're not supposed to eat it, all right? Because a catfish, it doesn't have fins and scales. A catfish has smooth skin damn near like a human or like a shark. You ain't supposed to want to eat that. And catfish, they are responsible, or they're one of the creatures that's responsible for cleaning the ocean or cleaning the sea or cleaning a river or a lake, all right? You ain't supposed to eat catfish. Just because it's a moving creature and you can kill it and cook it, that doesn't mean that it's good for your health. That don't mean that, every and anything could be eaten, all right? So it says, and then when you're dealing with shrimp, crab, and lobster and things similar in that family, those are like water roaches, all right? They're responsible for what? Cleaning the ocean, a lake, river, all right? It says birds/flying insects, birds of prey, and detestable winged creatures are forbidden, right? It says purpose. It says the primary purpose was not health, which it is health, but ultimately it's to obey the will of the Most High, right? And his rules. It says, but to make Israel consecrated and distinct, be holy. To be holy means to what? Be clean, right? For I am holy. They quote in the scripture. It says ritual impurity. It says touching carcasses, which you would be unclean for 7 days. And then I just did a video on the water purification law. All right, going back to the custom of the red heifer. It says touching carcasses of unclean animals made a person ritually unclean until evening. It says application. These specific dietary restrictions were for the Old Testament Israelites. All right, meaning before Yahushua came on the scene. I try to pick a different word, but came on the scene during the Roman Empire to be that perfect sacrifice, aka perfect atonement of sins for the nation of Israel. We was dying without mercy under 2 or 3 witnesses. All right, so during the old system, which consisted of the Levitical priesthood, right? Ultimately, the Old Testament, dying without mercy, not being under grace. It says these specific dietary restrictions were for the Old Testament Israelites. Many Christians believe they are not binding in the New Testament. All right. So that's pretty much it. So now, let me just show you some examples real quick. Right? As you can see there, some examples from Leviticus 11, clean, unclean. Right? Let's go down here. So I mean, y'all pretty much, y'all get the point. Right? See? Gives you some more examples. Right? Let's go down here. All right, so that's pretty much it. We could get into the scriptures. Let's check this out. Sorry, I don't feel like going to no Facebook. So this is Leviticus, the 11th chapter in the KJV. And as you can see, it says laws about animals for food. It also has it mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 3 through 21. All right? Which I may or may not go into this. All right? Now, the NLT, it says ceremonial clean and unclean animals. So this is what the chapter is dealing with. Animals, meaning foods that Israelites can eat and not eat. All right? So let's get into it. So matter of fact, you know what? Let me actually go into Deuteronomy 14 first. See if I can pull that up. That's what I hate about the blue letters sometimes. Okay, I spelled it wrong. It's D-E-U. Okay. Should pop up. Perfect. All right. So when you're dealing with Deuteronomy, the 14th chapter, which the word Deuteronomy, it means the second book of the law, right? So this chapter also deals with clean and unclean animals. Let me see how long the chapter is. Okay, the chapter is pretty long. All right. The NLT, let's see what that says. Yep, same thing. Ceremonial clean and unclean. All right. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to go over Deuteronomy chapter 14, all right, and verse 1. I'm going to just read it in the NLT. So Deuteronomy 14 and 1, it says, since you are the people of the Lord, your God, never cut yourselves or shave the head above your foreheads in mourning for the dead, right? So it's going into a lot of the customs. So when you read in the book of Deuteronomy, it goes into a lot of laws, different laws and customs of the Israelites, right? That we was keeping when we was in our land, when we was sovereign and independent. Now we can't do that. So that's why the Most High, through Yahweh's blood of sacrifice, he applies grace unto us, all right? It says, you have been set apart as holy to Yahweh your God, and he has chosen you from all the nations of the earth to be his own special treasure. Because the Israelites, pursuing the Deuteronomy 7 and 6, we're above all the nations on the planet Earth. Because we're the nation that the Most High gave his laws, statutes, and commandments to, who he revealed himself unto. And we're the nation whom the Messiah died for. When you read Acts 5 and 31, that only applies to Israelites. You can't be a spiritual Israelite. That don't exist. It says, verse 3, and as you can see up top, it quotes Leviticus 11, 1 through 47, right? It says, you must not eat any detestable, meaning abominable animals that are ceremonial unclean. It gives you examples. These are the animals you may eat: the ox, the sheep, the goat, the deer, the gazelle, the roe deer, the wild goat, the ibex, the antelope, and the mountain sheep. So it's going into what? Animals that we can eat. Pursuing the what? Verse 4. It says, you may eat any animal that has completely split hooves and chews the cud. All right? Now, when it says chew the cud, let's see what that means. It says the literal meaning dietary law, right? It says it refers to the process of rumination where animals like cattle, sheep, and goats regurgitate and rechew their food for better digestion. Animals like the camel chews the cud but no split hoof, and pig split hoof but doesn't chew the cud. So you have certain animals that meet one requirement that allows you to eat them, but then you're not allowed to eat it. It's unclean, right? Because it's missing the other requirement. It says, and pig has split hooves but doesn't chew the cud, meaning they don't regurgitate their food for better digestion, right? Were declared unclean because they didn't meet both criteria, cud chewing and cloven/split hooves. All right, so there you go. That's what chewing the cud mean. So let's read that. Deuteronomy 14:6 NLT version. It says, you may eat any animal that has completely split hooves and chews the cud. But if the animal doesn't have both, see, that's why I said you have particular animals, they meet one requirement, but they don't meet the whole criteria, right? It says, but if the animal doesn't have both, meaning split hooves and chews the cud, it may not be eaten. So you may not eat the camel, the hare, or the hyrax. They chew the cud, but do not have split hooves. So they are ceremonial unclean for you, meaning you're not supposed to eat it, all right? Then you wonder why people, they have so many health problems, dying of cancer. They're diabetic because their diet is not balanced. It says, and you may not eat the pig. It has split hooves, but does not chew the cud. So it is ceremonial unclean for you. And pig meat is disgusting. It has worms in it. It causes cancer, right? It's a disgusting animal. They eat trash. They eat garbage. There's nothing nutritious about eating pork. It says, it has split hooves but does not chew the cud, so it is ceremonial clean for you. You may not eat the meat of these animals or even touch their carcasses. We're not even supposed to touch them, all right? It says, of all the marine animals, meaning the animals in the sea, all right, you may eat whatever has both fins and scales. So you're not supposed to eat shit like shark, whale, catfish. You're not supposed to eat that shit, all right? What's the purpose of a catfish? The purpose of a catfish is to clean out an ocean, lake, or river, right? You're not supposed to eat that. They don't have fins and scales. It says, 10, you may not, however, eat marine animals that do not have both fins and scales. They are ceremonial unclean for you, right? So even if it's an animal or a fish you've never seen, the fact that it has fins and scales, you would be allowed to eat it, all right? And then if you're unsure, just don't eat it. Continuing on. So the Most High, he's giving you the process of elimination on how to determine, right, based off of the law, if you can eat an animal or not. It says, you may eat any bird that is ceremonial clean. These are the birds you may not eat. The griffin vulture, the bearded vulture, the black vulture. So we're not supposed to eat vultures in general because they're scavengers. They eat carcasses. So if they eating rotten meat and meat of dead animals, how would that be nutritious? It says, the kite, the falcon, buzzards of all kinds, ravens of all kinds, the eagle owl, the short-eared owl, the seagull, hawks of all kinds, the little owl, the gray owl, the barn owl, the desert owl, the Egyptian vulture, the cormorant, the stork, herons of all kinds, the hoopoe, and the bat. Let me just see what that is. That's a crazy ass name. Let's look that up. See if it's gonna give me something. It says a salmon pink Eurasian bird with a long down curved bill. Oh, okay, I know what they talk about. They talk about like them birds that stand on one foot. They eat shrimp. That's why they turn pink like that. It says, and a bat. All winged insects that walk along the ground are ceremonial unclean for you, right? And may not be eaten. But you may eat any winged bird or insect that is ceremonial clean. You must not eat anything that has died a natural death. You may give it to a foreigner living in your town, or you may sell it to a stranger, right? You could sell that to a heathen, because the heathens, they weren't given the law, statutes, and commandments. So let them eat and live like how they want to live. These laws is for the Israelites, all right? It says, living in your town, or you may sell it to a stranger, but do not eat it yourselves, for you are set apart as holy. And the word holy, it means what? Clean, right? It says as holy, right, or separate to Yahweh your God. You must not cook a young goat in its mother's milk, all right? And then it gives you some more laws. So there you go. So that's Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 3 through 11. Now we could go back and start off in Leviticus 11 and 1, because this is all the same topic, all right? So now it's going into what? Laws about animals for food, right? Leviticus 11 and 1. I'm going to segue between the KJV and the NLT. It says, and the Lord. Now, whenever you see the word Lord in caps, it's talking about the God of Israel, Yahweh. The YHWH, the name is Yahweh, all right? Whether you want to believe it or not, that's the name of the Most High. And his son name is Yahushua. Spake unto Moses and to Aaron, saying unto them, who's of them? The children of Israel, that was given the law, statutes, and commandments. The old covenant as well as the new covenant is made with the Israelites, all right? It says, speak unto the children of Israel. And who are the children of Israel? The so-called Negroes, Hispanics, and Native American Indians. Our seed line, right? Our seed, men carry the seed is the sperm, makes up the 12 tribes of Israel. If you don't come from that seed, you can't make yourself an Israelite. That's not in the scriptures. It says, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, these are the beasts which ye shall eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Whatsoever parteth the hoof and is cloven footed and cheweth the cud among the beasts, that shall ye eat. Nevertheless, these shall ye not eat of them that chew the cud, or of them that divide the hoof, right? Meaning you're not supposed to eat these animals. So let me switch back to that NLT, because it's more simplified, right? NLT on Leviticus 11 and 4. I'm going to just read in the NLT, it's better. It says, you may not, however, eat the following animals that have split hooves or that chew the cud, but not both. Meaning they got to fit both criteria. They got to meet the criteria, the requirements that allow you to eat it, right? You can't just have one, but then miss the other. It says, but not both. The camel chews the cud, right? But does not have split hooves. So it is ceremonial unclean for you. So the Lord is giving you examples on how to look at an animal, even if you've never seen it, even if you don't know shit about the animal. He's giving you the examples in the scriptures on how to look at an animal and determine if you can eat it or not. You can't just eat something because it's moving and you're stronger than it, or you got a weapon to kill it and you hungry. It don't work like that, right? So it says, verse 5, the hyrax, right, which is a rabbit, chews the cud, but does not have split hooves, so it is unclean, right? It says the hare, which is another form of a rabbit, it's pretty much a bigger rabbit. It says the hare chews the cud, but does not have split hooves, right? Split hooves like a pig, right? So it is unclean. It says the pig has evenly split hooves, but does not chew the cud. So the pig at least one requirement, but then it don't chew the cud. And once again, if you don't know what chewing the cud is, chewing the cud, it refers to the process of rumination, where animals like cattle, sheep, and goats regurgitate and rechew their food for better digestion. All right? So there you go. It says animals like the camel chews the cud, but no split hoof. And pig, split hoof, but doesn't chew the cud. It says, were declared unclean because they didn't meet both criteria, cud chewing and cloven/split hooves. All right? Let's read about the rabbit. Note on rabbits, right? The hare, the hyrax. It says the Bible lists rabbits as chewing the cud, which is scientifically inaccurate for ruminants, but likely referred to their constant mouth movements or a form of re-ingestion, right? It says reflection/coprorphagy, right? I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but you see how it's spelled there. that look similar to chewing the cud to ancient observers. So let me give you an example of that. If you ever watch like a rabbit or like a rodent eat, it looks like they're regurgitating the food. It looks like they chew the cud because you see the mouth moving so much. So it looks like they breaking down the food for better digestion, but really they're not. All right, they just constantly chewing. It's not being properly broke down. All right. So now, NLT. This is Leviticus 11:6. It says, "The hare chews the cud, but does not have split hooves. It is unclean. The pig has evenly split hooves, but does not chew the cud, so it is unclean. You may not eat the meat of these animals or even touch their carcasses. They are ceremonial unclean for you. Of all the marine animals," meaning the animals in the sea you can eat, "these are the ones you may use for food. You may eat anything from the water if it has both fins and scales, whether taken from salt water or from streams." Right? It says, "But you must never eat animals from the sea or from rivers that do not have both fins and scales. They are detestable to you," meaning abomination. This applies both to little creatures that live in shallow water and to all creatures that live in deep water. They will always be detestable to you, meaning abominable to you, right? You must never eat their meat or even touch their dead bodies. Any marine animal that does not have both fins and scales is detestable to you, meaning abomination. It says, "These are the birds that are detestable to you," meaning birds that we shouldn't eat. Examples of what? Unclean birds that we can't eat. You must never eat them. The griffin vulture, the bearded vulture, the black vulture. And what do vultures do? They're scavengers. They eat dead carcasses. They eat rotten meat. So how would that be beneficial to your health to eat a scavenger? To just eat any animal that, for humans, they got a bad diet. They can handle that. They can handle eating rotten food and survive off of that, because that's how the Most High made them. But us as Israelites, we can't function like an animal. We don't have the internal organs and structures like a damn vulture. All right. So now let's give you some examples. The kite, falcons of all kinds, ravens of all kinds, the eagle owl, the short-eared owl, the seagull, hawks of all kinds, the little owl, the cormorant, the great owl, the barn owl, the desert owl, the Egyptian the Egyptian vulture, the stork, herons of all kinds, the hope pole, right? Which is talking about them, I guess you could say like flamingo, all right? They stand on like 1 foot, and originally they're white, but because of the krill or the shrimp that they eat, they turn pink, all right? I remember I watched a documentary on that on the Discovery Channel, Animal Planet. It says, and a bat, you're supposed to eat bats, right? Hey, if Moab, the so-called Chinese, Asian people want to eat that, let them eat it. They're not Israelites. They're not the seed of the promise. They ain't special. It says, you must not eat winged insects that walk along the ground. They are detestable to you, meaning you're supposed to eat it. It's an abomination, right? You may, however, eat winged insects that walk along the ground and have joint legs so they can jump, like locusts. That's why John the Baptist, all right, that's what they eat. They eat locusts, all right? You can eat locusts. You got Mexicans, they like that. You know, they like to fry the locusts up, right? That's like a delicacy. They're not going off. That goes back to the law. It says, 22 NLT, the insects you are permitted to eat include all kinds of locusts, ball locusts, crickets, and grasshoppers. All other winged insects that walk along the ground are detestable to you. So even though you could eat these things, you may choose not to eat it. Like me personally, I'm not eating no fucking locusts. I'm not eating no grasshopper. I'm not eating that shit, all right? It says, but if you eat it, you're not breaking the law. It says, the following creatures will make you ceremonial unclean. If any of you, the Israelites, touch their carcasses, you will be defiled until evening. if you pick up their carcasses, you must wash your clothes, and you will remain defiled until evening. Any animal that has split hooves that are not evenly divided, or that does not chew the cud, is unclean for you. If you touch the carcass of such an animal, you will be defiled, right? You be defiled till evening. So you see how strict these laws, statutes, and commandments are. This is why us as the elect, we had to be under grace, because we're not sovereign and independent. We're not in our land to be able to properly keep these laws, statutes, and commandments. And we're in sinful bodies anyway. All right, we in captivity. We're scattered through the four corners of the earth. So as an entire nation of people, we can't keep the law perfectly. You can't just have 10 Israelites, trying to keep the law, and then the other 7 billion, they not keeping the law. That don't count. All right, we got to keep the law together. But right now, the Lord is dealing with what? The elect of the nation of Israel that's under grace, to where we're not held to that old covenant standard. We can't keep with sinful flesh. All right. Even concerning the meat that you buy in particular stores, restaurants, bodegas, daily supermarkets, right? You don't know if they pray to an idol, right? But what you do is, pursuing the Romans, the 14th chapter, you bless the food, or you pray over it in the name of Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahawashi, and we're under grace. So the Most High, He not going to look at it as, okay, just because this heathen gave you this food, or this idol worshiper, or this fornicator, gave you this food at a butcher shop, He gonna put you to death. No, I mean, certain things is just out of our control, because we're not sovereign and independent. We're in the bottom. When you read Deuteronomy 20th chapter, it said what? That there shall be no might in thy hand. So you don't want to overcomplicate grace, all right? It says Leviticus 11:27, of the animals, this is the NLT version, of the animals that walk on all fours, those that have paws are unclean. So you're supposed to eat no fucking cat, dog, right? It says, if you touch the carcass of such an animal, you will be defiled until evening. It says, if you pick up its carcass, you must wash your clothes, and you will remain defiled until evening. These animals are unclean for you. Of the small animals that scurry along the ground, these are unclean for you. The mole rat, the rat, large lizards of all kinds, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the common lizard, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. It says, all these small animals are unclean for you. If any of you touch the dead body of such an animal, you will be defiled until evening. If such an animal dies and falls on something, that object will be unclean. This is true whether the object is made of wood, cloth, leather, or burlap. Whatever its use, you must dip it in water, and it will remain defiled until evening. After that, it will be ceremonial clean and may be used again. So think about how many people's pets died in the house that had dogs and cats, and that area is unclean. You're not keeping the law perfectly. From the mixed fabrics that we cannot keep the law perfectly. It's laws you probably don't even know about. That's in Deuteronomy, all right? In whatever chapter. It's so many laws that we can't keep. So for an Israelite to say stupid shit out of his mouth, like he's perfect, like how Sakari used to say, the Genesis camp as well, saying that, oh, you got to keep the law, statutes, and commandments. They don't sin. This is shit that they said in the past. They don't sin. They perfect. No, you're not perfect. We need Yahawashi, all right? It says, if such an animal falls into a clay pot, everything in the pot will be defiled, and the pot must be smashed, right? If the water from such a container spills on any food, the food will be defiled, and any beverage in such a container will be defiled. Any object on which the carcass of such an animal falls will be defiled. It is an oven or hearth, it must be destroyed, for it is defiled, and you must treat it accordingly, right? I'll give you another example. It's like when a fly flies in your drink, or animal, or some type of insect flies in your drink. You normally, what's your reaction? To throw the drink out. Even if it's a freshly poured drink, naturally, going back to Romans the 2nd chapter, all right, being a Jew inwardly, it's just things you naturally do to keep the law. It's just things that's just natural to you. Like 2 men shouldn't sleep together, 2 women shouldn't sleep together. That feeling of guilt, right? Certain things you just know not to do. It says, however, if the carcass of such an animal falls into a spring or a cistern, the water will still be clean, but anyone who touches the carcass will be defiled. If the carcass falls on seed grain to be planted in the field, the seed will still be considered clean. But if the seed is wet when the carcass falls on it, the seed will be defiled, right? If an animal you are permitted to eat dies, meaning animals that we can eat, now it's giving you the flip side. Before, it was going into unclean animals that we can't eat, that if they died in the water, right, or they died in the clay pot, or they died in a specific area, that area, you have to clean it up. If it falls on you, all right, or dies on you, you will be unclean to evening. You have to wash yourself, right? So now what's going into if a clean animal died. So it says, NLT Leviticus 11:39. If an animal you are permitted to eat dies, and you touch its carcass, you will be defiled unto evening. So it's the same process if an animal dies, right? If you eat any of its meat, talk about a dead, clean animal. If you eat any of its meat or carry away its carcass, you must wash your clothes. You will remain defiled unto evening. It says all small animals that scurry along the ground are detestable, meaning an abomination, right? And you must never eat them. This includes all animals that slither along on their bellies, obviously like snakes. It says, as well as those with 4 legs and those with many feet, which I ain't eating nothing with many feet, you know? It says all such animals that scurry along the ground are detestable, and you must never eat them. Do not defile yourselves by touching them. You must not make yourselves ceremonial unclean because of them. It says, for he is Yahweh, our God. You must consecrate yourselves and be holy because he is holy. So just as the Lord is perfect and holy, we're supposed to be holy, right? We're supposed to represent the Lord as his priests on the planet Earth. And ultimately, under the new covenant in the kingdom of heaven, we're going to perfectly implement the laws, statutes, and commandments all over the planet Earth, turning it into a paradise, all right? Because that's what it says in Acts 3, and I believe it's either 19 through 21, how the Lord is going to restore the restitution of things, meaning just as it was in the Garden of Eden before the fall, that's how it's going to be on the planet Earth, but it's going to be even better, all right? It says, so do not defile yourselves with any of these small animals that scurry along the ground. So we're not even supposed to have them as pets. We ain't supposed to touch them. It says, for he, the Lord, and the one who brought you up from the land of Egypt, that might be your God. Therefore, you must be holy because I am holy. These are the instructions regarding land animals, birds, marine creatures, and animals that scurry the ground. By these instructions, you will know what is unclean and clean, and which animals may be eaten and which may not be eaten. All right. So, you know, that's the point. All right. You're not supposed to use grace as a license to sin. Just because the Messiah died for us, that doesn't give you the right to eat pork, because it still has consequences that could affect your health. It could kill you. It's not just pork. It's anything in the scriptures, Deuteronomy 14 or Leviticus 11, that the Lord said that don't eat it. It's ceremonial unclean. You ain't supposed to eat it. If you go against that, you're going to see what's going to happen to your life and your health. All right? You're going to get some type of infection. You're going to get some type of disease. So That's pretty much it. You know, these laws, statutes, and commandments is for our benefit. You know, we can't keep all the laws perfectly because we're not sovereign and independent. We need Yahushua for that. All right. But ultimately, there's laws you can keep and you can rehearse it through faith. Lord willing, you was edified. Shalom.